Welcome to Common Mansplaining, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Common Mansplaining. Eddie here. I am back with another heavy heart as we have witnessed another true tragedy. Another ICE shooting has taken place in Minneapolis. And guys, I got to say, once again, I am extremely frustrated with everything about this circumstance, right? Number one, of course, the tragedy itself is terribly frustrating, terribly off-putting, and extremely sad. Number two, I'm terribly frustrated with the way that people are reacting to it. Everyone just using their own confirmation bias to tell them what they think they saw rather than actually looking at the event and judging by the objective facts, the actual circumstances surrounding the event. And it drives me nuts. Guys, if you were on the right and you believe that Trump is a good person and you believe in the ICE mission, that does not mean that you have to blindly follow everything that Trump and ICE does and pretend like it's all good. And if you were on the left and you don't like Trump and you don't like what ICE's mission stands for, it doesn't mean that you have to blindly hate every aspect of it. You have to be able to acknowledge that some things just are what they are. Both sides need to do this. We're going to go into it. I'm going to show you the video. Once again, I want to preface this by saying these are some disturbing situations, some disturbing images. So please guard yourself. Make sure if you guys are easily upset, this may not be the video for you, but we're going to go into it. We're going to see the videos one at a time because this is what you need to do. You need to check out the video, and you have to check it from several angles because I'm going to tell you, the very first video I saw of this, I couldn't see a thing. Everybody was making all these claims like, oh, he had the gun, he had a phone, he had this, he had that, the guy removed the gun. I couldn't see any of that. All I saw was a guy struggling. That was it. The very first video I saw was like a guy struggling with ICE. That was it. So we're going to watch the videos, and CNN, I believe, contrary to what they typically do, CNN has actually put together a decent montage from various angles that kind of puts this event together. So I got to give CNN credit for a change. So let's take a look at that.
Federal immigration officers fatally shot a man Saturday in Minneapolis. He was an ICU nurse who worked at a local Veteran Affairs hospital. Another controversial killing by U.S. immigration agents, and the second U.S. citizen killed this month. CNN analyzed cell phone footage from multiple angles. Taken together, they appear at odds with the Department of Homeland Security's initial claims about the lead-up to officers firing on Alex Pretti. Around 9 a.m. Central, video captures two people approaching a federal immigration officer in front of an unidentified vehicle. The sound of whistles is
Now, I'm going to go through this as we do this. I want to point out some things as we walk ourselves through this video because I don't want you guys to miss them. Item number one, they're in the middle of the street. They're blocking traffic. That's an illegal protest. Item number one. Item number two, the officer is clearly giving them instruction. Now, I don't hear the instructions because they're blowing their whistles like lunatics, but the instructions are probably get the F out of the road. Just a guess.
Blaring in the background. Alex Pretti enters the frame here. He's filming an officer interacting with protesters and waving a car through. 15 seconds later, Pretti yells,
Do not push them into the traffic.
In their statement, DHS said that an individual approached officers with, quote, a 9mm semi-automatic hand.
All right. Again, I'm going to point something out. So the DHS says an individual approached U.S. border officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. Now, that's a trick, right? That's a propagandist trick. So DHS is playing a game, right? And I want you guys to witness it because DHS isn't perfect. He's approaching with a handgun. That's technically true. He has a handgun. He doesn't have it out. He's not holding it. He's not carrying it. He's not brandishing it in a threatening way. But he technically has one, right? So their statement, while technically accurate, gives everyone the wrong impression. Don't be taken in by DHS. Watch the event for yourself.
Gun. This video seems to show officers approaching Pretti instead of the other way around. We'll see later that Pretti does appear to have had a gun in his waistband, but this video shows he didn't have a gun in his hand, only a phone. Video from this white car shows an up-close angle of a federal immigration officer pushing one protester.
I want to see something real quick. I want to see the moment that they approach him again.
see later that Pretti does appear to have had a gun in his waistband, but this video shows
Yeah, it looks like he's got a phone in his hand the whole time, at least from these angles.
he didn't have a gun in his hand, only a phone. Video from this white car shows an up-close angle of a federal immigration officer pushing one protester. Then, 3 seconds later, he pushes Pretti. And then as the camera comes into focus, you see the same federal officer push a third protester with the orange backpack. Pretti raises his hand and turns away, just as the officer sprays him with a chemical irritant. You see Pretti and the other protester trying to help the person with the orange backpack. You can see here an officer pulling Pretti off of this person. 3 more officers join, and then 2 more. Pretti is on the ground under them. One officer in a tan beanie can be seen repeatedly striking Pretti's head with a metal can. You can see an officer in a gray jacket walk into the frame. There isn't a gun in his hand. Seconds later, officers shout.
Now, I do want to point this out. And I'm going to talk about this in its entirety later, but right now, Pretti is not lying down as instructed. He's not ceasing to resist. He's continuing to resist. Now, I'm going to talk about how this event took place and how it started, because I don't think that was right either. But right now, he should stop moving entirely and should lie on the ground and give up 100%. Whether he was right or wrong to be in that situation, whether he was right or wrong to help somebody else, whether he was right or wrong to be in any of these circumstances whatsoever, whether the circumstances are of his making or the ICE officers are abusing their power, none of that matters in this moment. In this moment, he should not be fighting at all.
Officer removes the gun from Pretti's belt. The officer steps away from the scene carrying a firearm, seen here in his right hand.
I want you guys to see that.
Officers shout. The officer removes the gun from Pretti's belt.
Definitely takes the gun out, or somebody does. I can't tell if it's the same person, but we think it is.
Officer steps away from the scene carrying a firearm, seen here in his right hand. Then, gunfire.
Now, again, we're going to talk about this from a legal framework and a moral framework, but I want to point out, again, there's a difference between what we know as an observer looking at the video after the fact from multiple angles, right? This is like the instant replay in a sports event, right? We have advantages that the referees in the moment don't have, right? And that's what the officers are, they're referees, right? So what you have here is we can see the gun was removed. We can see the gun is no longer an issue. We can also see that the guy continues to struggle, but we can know that there's no lethal danger at play. However, I would mention that an officer in those circumstances may or may not realize that that lethal danger had been removed, right? He may not have seen the gun removed, right? So he may still be fighting against what he perceives is an armed person. Tough to say.
At least 10 shots ring out. We looked back at the scene from different angles and slowed down the footage. This officer, wearing a black beanie, can be seen drawing his firearm and pointing it in Pretti's direction. We can't see his gun when the first shot is fired, but we can see that this officer fired the second shot. In this angle, you see a second officer also had his gun drawn, and here, he's pointing his weapon at Pretti as we hear gunshots, though it isn't clear if he's the one firing.
What the f***?
Now, something else to mention here, right, is after a gun is fired in a police-citizen contact like this, everything gets escalated to the maximum degree, right? So if one officer is firing, many other officers likely will fire because they will perceive that one officer has perceived a lethal threat, right? Whether that officer was correct to do so or not, these are why these situations are so insane and so tragic, is because half the time they may be firing against someone they think is a lethal threat, when in reality it's based off of information that doesn't actually definitively point to a lethal threat.
Did they f***ing kill that guy?
Pretti collapses onto the ground as the officers scatter backwards from around him. The same agent in the black beanie from earlier can be seen firing 5 final shots as Pretti.
Now, I don't care who you are, firing 5 additional shots into an already collapsed corpse who has already been shot multiple times, at the very least, that's unbelievably over abusing his power. Unbelievably over abusing his power. Like, why on earth do you need to continue firing? I get that you thought maybe that it was a lethal threat at one point in time, maybe. And I get that you maybe thought that you needed to take a shot, maybe. I don't personally agree, but I get that somebody might think that. But after you've shot him twice or 3 times, I don't know how many times he'd been shot at that point, but the guy shoots him 5 more times? Holy cow.
Pretti lies there, motionless. Nobody approached his body for 24 seconds. When officers do return to Pretti, they appear to begin searching his body.
So I do want to point out here, somebody says, and I don't know if you can hear it. I'm going to play it again. Listen for it very carefully. Somebody says, "Where's the gun?" Okay, listen for that.
Body for 24 seconds. When officers do return to Pretti, they appear to begin searching his body.
You hear that? Where's the gun?
Video shows.
So, all right. Obviously, an intense situation. Obviously, that cop, at least one of the police officers, doesn't know where the gun is, was not able to track that firearm. So he doesn't know whether or not Pretti is actually a lethal threat. Now, again, this is a terribly confusing and intense event with a lot of nuance to it, a lot of fine complications. And yet, I'm going to say it again, right? So, this is similar to the Renee Good case, although I would say this one is legally less secure than Renee Good's. Actually, originally when I saw this, right, and I saw the guy struggling with all the officers, my initial takeaway was that this is a guy fighting with cops. That's almost never a recipe for a birthday cake, right? That's almost never a recipe for a good event, right? So whenever you're struggling with police officers, and this is still true, if you're struggling with police officers, you're basically asking to get hurt, right? You basically are. Now, I want to just point out, though, that the facts that weigh heavily on my mind are Pretti doesn't seem involved in this protest in advance. He just seems to be filming, right? The cops are extremely aggressive immediately with people that just happen to be, now they're in the way, right? They're protesting illegally, and they were probably given instructions to leave and didn't. Probably. These are just educated guesses. But that being said, why not just arrest them? Why not cite them right there? Why not arrest them? Take them downtown. Do your thing. I mean, I don't understand why they had to start pushing and shoving and throwing them out of the way. Now, if you listen carefully to the video, Pretti says, "You're pushing them into traffic." Now, I don't think that's accurate, but I think it's something that you would say to a police officer pushing people out of the way when you want to object to what they're doing. So his objection is noted and reasonable, right? Again, they start pushing people around. Now, Pretti goes to try to help, which I'm just going to say it, was a mistake, right? When a police officer is involved in a police-citizen contact, and by the way, I've made this mistake myself personally. When a police officer is involved in a police-citizen contact, stay the F out of it, right? I made this mistake actually once with my brother. My brother got pulled over, and if he's watching this, he'll remember. He got pulled over, and I waited for him to finish with the ticket. And I got a ticket, too, for my trouble, just because I waited for him to finish with my brother. So I learned the hard way. Stay out of the situation. Next thing that's important, right? The cops seem to be approaching Pretti. Now, there's a section of the film that's kind of missing, right? We're missing the segment and the angle where the cops go from pushing the people into the road to pushing them off to the side of the road and off the road, right? So there's this segment that's missing. Now, that segment could be key context. It could be the key where Pretti makes an aggressive move towards the officers that we don't see. But that being said, from what I can see, from what is available to us at this moment, and by the way, I wouldn't put it past CNN to hide that kind of thing, but from what we have available to us at this moment, it appears that the officers are the aggressors the entire time. And even though they may be in the right to aggress in certain circumstances, that doesn't mean that legally their right doesn't transfer to a moral right, right? Just because you have the legal right to throw your weight around doesn't mean that you have the moral right to throw your weight around. So throwing people around and pushing people out of the way is just cruel. Even if you're allowed to do it, it's cruel. You should do things by the book with dispassionate action, right? It shouldn't be like, oh, I'm mad that these people won't get out of my way, and I'm mad that they're challenging my authority, so I'm going to start showing them my authority, right? When you get to the point, trust this, take this from a leader, from somebody who's been a manager for most of my life and was a leader in the military. When it gets to the point where you have to enforce that you're the boss, when it gets to the point where you have to be like, I'm the boss, you've lost your authority. You've already lost it. So don't ever get to that point. Stay cool, stay calm, stay collected, and act with professionalism. These guys were not professional. I don't care what else they weren't professional. Now, this is again a situation where multiple people make mistakes. And I won't claim that Pretti is free of guilt. He isn't. He's not free of guilt. But he's much more free of guilt than Renee Good was. And Renee Good was even a situation with nuance. I don't even think the Renee Good shooting was morally right. It might have been legally right, but I don't think it was morally right. I think the table, since I've started watching this, the tables have turned for me. And I think that this officer is in the wrong 100%. I think he may even have legal trouble. Now, maybe not, right? It's obvious that, one, he thought the gun was still there. At least one of them did. Two, he thought this guy was still a lethal threat. Three, the guy was still struggling, right? So legally, he may have a defense. I don't know. It's complicated and it's difficult to know. But that being said, I think this is close. This is a close one. And it really, really upsets me that nobody is actually looking at the event like I just did and analyzing it step by step to try to understand the events as they played out. Instead, I had a million people tell me up front before even some of the videos had been released that this guy was again a cold-blooded murderer. And I had a million people tell me up front before the videos had been released that this guy was completely 100% justified in his self-defensive actions. And both are again false. Again, why can't people just actually view the event for themselves and be reasonable and be dispassionate and be objective about what took place? It drives me nuts. This is the kind of gaslighting that's tearing our nation apart. And both sides are doing this nonsense. Both sides are pretending. The left wing is pretending like this guy's a murderer before they could tell. And the right wing is pretending like this guy is a hero before anybody can tell. Right? Kristi Noem, in her statement, says that this guy was likely going to kill police officers. I'm like, I don't see any evidence of that. I don't see any evidence that even indicated that that was something in the horizon. Any evidence that that was even the trajectory that this thing was going in. Until he got into a police citizen contact and struggled. Now, that's his big mistake. He made several mistakes. One, he shouldn't have got involved in the first place. He should have just dispersed when the officers told everybody to disperse. Number two, he shouldn't have tried to interject himself between an officer and that officer's police citizen contact. He shouldn't have tried to get in the way. Number three, after he did get in the way and the cops were pushing him to the ground, he should have immediately laid on the ground, put his hands behind his back or on his head as you are instructed to do. Now, let's talk about, those are his mistakes. That doesn't give anybody the right to shoot him. It might give somebody the right to arrest him, maybe. But I think even that's pushing it, honestly. I think they should have just let the whole thing go. And, if they refuse to get out of the road or something like that, then okay, maybe you cite somebody, you give them a ticket or something for illegal protest. But I think this whole thing has gone way out of proportion. Way out of proportion. Now that we've discussed Pretti's mistakes, let's talk about the officer's mistakes. It does not take 6 people to bring somebody down. It doesn't. And if it does, you are poorly trained as an officer. End of story. End of story. Even if that guy is a big dude on PCP or something like that, you still should be able, as a police officer, as a trained officer of the law, to subdue someone without harm. And this is, once again, I've said it a million times, this is once again why every officer should be trained in jiu-jitsu. 100%. You should jiu-jitsu or sambo or something like that. You need to train yourself to grapple so that you can control the outcome of the fight without hurting anybody. You can make sure that they realize that if they do move, you can hurt them. You can break their arm or something like that. Still not a lethal problem, but it's something that you have in your arsenal, right? Number 2, I hate to be so cliche as to say, why were these real bullets? But my question is now at this point, why are they real bullets, right? I'm not saying that they can't use real bullets and that somebody can't have a real firearm on them as a police officer, right? We give them that right. We trust them with that use of force. But why not use a taser here? Like, why? I see the guy use a chemical irritant, and of course, I don't know if you realize, guys, but when you use a chemical irritant on somebody, you're already putting them in a situation where they feel like they would have to defend themselves, even if they shouldn't, right? Even if the lawful thing to do is just to lie down and take whatever and just stay there and don't move. It's very difficult to control that type of reaction if you are being sprayed with mace or something like that. And I've actually had chemical irritant sprayed at me before. It's your body reacts, right? You just don't have that choice. You're going to go, you're going to go, you're going to like put your hands up. You're going to get to the point where you are in fight or flight mode, right? That's just what your body does. And even if you're extremely disciplined, that's going to happen at least to an extent. So that when they use that chemical irritant, that doesn't de-escalate things. That ramps things up, right? So that was a mistake too by police officers. That guy that was like wailing on him with the butt of his gun, holy cow. What is he just like? Reminds me of a schoolyard fight where like people who aren't even involved just like want to get in and get their licks in just so they can say, oh, I got 2 shots in myself. Like, what kind of garbage is that? That dude didn't even need to be in the situation. This whole thing should have been like maybe 2 officers to manage this entire situation. Now, the other officers are there for support. They should have kept a perimeter. They should have made sure that the rest of this is what I want to know, right? How come all these officers in these situations aren't able to hold each other accountable to good police work? That's what I want to know. I realize that 1 or 2 officers might have a big head, might be on a power trip, and might go off the deep end. That's what the other officers are for in my team, right? Like when I was in the military, we were all expected to hold each other to the highest standards of the United States military. And if any one of us was messing up, every single one of us in the team, in the platoon, in the squad, whatever we were doing, would take care of the group and make sure that everyone is acting with professionalism and maintaining those standards. So why are these other cops not doing that? That's my next question. Finally, that dude that took the gun out of his waist, right, out of his waistband, he should have clearly yelled, I have the firearm. He is no longer a lethal threat. That was mistake number 3 for the cops, or 4. I don't even know how many mistakes were on for the cops. The cops have like so many mistakes, it's hard to even count them. The next mistake was, even if you thought this guy was a lethal threat, it is very difficult for someone that is getting beat up by 6 police officers to reach behind himself under his shirt into his waistband to pick out a gun that was strapped. It seemed to be strapped. I don't know. That I'm guessing a little bit on. So, but it seemed to be strapped. It looked like it was. It looked like the guy had to unstrap it to get the gun out. So like you're talking about a lot of resistance to those movements. And meanwhile, all the police are able to restrict the movements of his arms. They're able to, again, this is where jiu-jitsu would be a miracle, right? So I can't even begin to tell you how frustrating this event is. And then finally, that guy that shoots him like 17 extra times at the end. I mean, I'm being facetious. It was like 5, but still, when he keeps on shooting after the guy is already probably lethally injured, that's insane. That is insane. Even if he was legally able to do it, that is the most immoral, abuse of power action I've ever seen in my life. That is insane. So, guys, for those of you who are like avid Trump supporters out there, you need to realize that this was a messed up situation and should never have happened. Now, I want to address where this goes from here, because what everybody on the left is going to say is, oh, don't you think we should pull out of Minneapolis now? Aren't you mad at Trump now? Don't you think that the ICE mission is done now, Eddie? And I'm like, no. Believe it or not, this horrible situation with these ridiculous, stupid officers that probably belong in jail does not change the mission, right? And this is where people lose sight again of logic. If the mission of upholding and enforcing our immigration law was the correct mission before, then an error in execution does not change that. If that was the implementation like order, right? Like if Trump was saying, you know what, just shoot them if they resist. If that's what he said, then we have a problem with the mission, right? Then we have a problem mission level. But if it's just the mission is enforce immigration, if you see exigent circumstances, arrest them on site. If these are the orders given, and I believe they are, I truly do, then somebody messing that up does not change the mission at hand. It does not change the righteousness of enforcing immigration law. Just because somebody screws up, and this is a terrible screw up, this is a horrible, horrible tragedy that should never have taken place. Just because somebody screws up doesn't mean that that mission should go away. Now, I realize at the political level, Trump's got to think about optics, so he may make some adjustments. I don't know. I think one good adjustment would be more training for ICE officers. Get them jujitsu practice. Put tasers in their hand, because I don't see why they need to continue to fire lethally. Now, in the Renee Good situation, lethal attack might have been warranted, more so than this, at least legally speaking. Because what is a taser going to do to a car, right? Like the taser is just worthless. You would need a projectile to penetrate the windshield of the vehicle. But in this situation, a taser would have just put this guy out, like just zap him, like shoot him with an electro gun, you know, and then you put him down and he can't do anything. I don't know why that isn't being used. Do the ICE officers not get issued a taser gun? I don't know. That's a question. Maybe I should research. I'm sure some of them get it, right? But this whole thing is really, really frustrating because, one, the way the media has portrayed it, right? Everybody going in their own corner and using the confirmation bias that they already have, the way that the general populace is taking it, doing the same thing. Everybody on Trump's side saying this is absolutely defensible. Everybody on the anti-Trump side saying this is a horrible murder. And I got to be honest, it's closer to the left being correct this time, right? So Renee Good was probably closer to the right being good. This one's closer to the left. But you realize that these protesters are getting what they want by continuing to press officers into these bad decisions. They will eventually get bad decisions, right? Here's the thing. Nobody's perfect. No human is perfect. And I'm not using this to excuse what the ICE officers did here. I'm telling you this because when I say that, everyone is going to screw up eventually, right? It's just like walking. Everyone knows how to walk, but eventually you stumble. Eventually you trip over your own feet. Eventually you trip over a rock or a curb. Everyone makes mistakes, no matter how good you are at something, no matter how perfect and practiced and trained you are. Everyone makes mistakes. So these protesters, what they are doing is actually really smart strategically. What they are doing is they are pressing these officers to make decisions over and over and over again. And they shouldn't have to. They shouldn't have to. What should happen is the local PD should step in and remove most of these decisions for the officers, for the ICE officers. They should be cooperating with ICE. They should be cooperating with the federal government. And most of, like this situation, this incident should have been handled by the local PD. Because when these people are in the middle of the street illegally protesting, local PD should have pulled them off to the side and cited them for it. End of story. And then the officers would never have gotten into this situation in the first place. Again, I'm not excusing what the ICE officers did, because what they did, I think, is terrible. I think they definitely need to be investigated. They definitely belong behind bars. And I'm going to tell you something else. If they don't get investigated, I'm going to be truly upset at DHS. I guess DHS has the ball on this one, but if DHS doesn't investigate this person, I'm going to be truly upset. Somebody needs to investigate. Somebody needs some oversight in this situation, because it's one thing for Renee Good where we could see a clear attack on the officer, whether it was intentional or not. This was not a clear attack on an officer. And like CNN mentioned, right, and of course they would go out of their way to mention this because it sounds good for their side, but it's still the truth. This guy had a permit to have the weapon. He was an ICU operator, right? Like, this guy is not your normal crazed left-wing person, right? It's not your normal crazed protester trying to get into strife. He's not paid to, instigate. He's just there as a bystander, and then he gets involved because he has a heart and he's trying to interject and get in the way of the ICE officers hurting other people. Now, he shouldn't have done that. That was a mistake, and he shouldn't have struggled after he got involved. That was a mistake. But that being said, I believe they had no right to shoot him. And that's where I'm going to leave it. That's my 2 cents on the issue. Let me know what you guys think. Please like, share, and subscribe. I'm sorry if this didn't come across happy-go-lucky. And I'm sorry for those of you out there that are Trump supporters who feel like I should just blindly buy into it, because this was not okay. This was not okay. And you need to know that too. Talk to you next time on Common Mansplaining.